There's some good news from Italy. Data released earlier this year showed that bad loans shrunk by significant amounts on the back of improved manufacturing. Are we going to see more of this good news coming this year? I'm asking Fabio Balboni, economist for Europe at HSBC. Fabio, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
So we've seen that bad loans, the loans that banks have kind of given up on, reduced in November last year compared to the same month the previous year by 2 billion, which is a very big figure and the largest reduction for the past 8 years. Are we going to see other good news coming out of Italy, both in the banking sector and elsewhere?
Yeah, but I think we have to be a little bit cautious because, of course, bad loans that have been going up and down a little bit is certainly good news. It is true that a quarter of these bad loans were in the residential sector, and we're starting to see prices at least marginally improving, and transactions are picking up, which suggests that probably we are likely to see a little bit of a further improvement there. And on top of that, as we know, some of the banks are actually starting to sell those as non-performing loans, so that increases the market, and that improves the incentives as well to try to offload some of them. So yes, I think the figures are likely to come down. We've seen some other good news in the economy, actually. For example, consumer confidence picked up towards the end of the year. So I think that's positive. Does it mean Italy is out of the woods? Well, I think we're quite far to be able to conclude that, because actually, when you look at industrial production, it's still 20% below pre-crisis period. So that means that there's quite a long way to go.
So the economy hasn't grown much or at all over the past few years after the recession, and the banking sector is very much aching and under pressure because of non-performing loans still at this incredibly large amounts, over 350 billion euros. But as we said, there are some bright spots now and there. Although at the same time, there is still quite a lot of uncertainty, especially when we look at the political side. So what is your forecast, bearing in mind also this kind of uncertainties?
Yeah, so I think, when I look at Italy, I think this year probably likely to grow in the region of 0.6. So still quite slow growth environment. And you mentioned the banks. Yes, non-performing loans could fall a little bit further, which is good for profitability of the banks, for capital. But it doesn't mean that banks will go back in a position where they can lend, in particular to the smaller Italian firms. 50% of workers in Italy are employed in firms with less than 9 employees, which of course, given the regulation on the banking sector, makes it very hard for the banks to go back to lend to the economy. And indeed, when you look at the growth of new loans, it's basically flat. So when Draghi says, I've restored the monetary transmission mechanism in the eurozone, it's true only 50%, but in terms of the volume, we haven't seen. So I think that's something that it will continue to linger, stay in Italy, generating a low growth environment. And as you mentioned, there is on top of that a little bit of political uncertainty after the recent constitutional court ruling on the electoral law for the lower house. This is likely to put more pressure to have early election this year in Italy. So we could have these, of course, adding to the general environment of uncertainty.
You mentioned Draghi. Tell me what you expect the ECB to do this year.
Well, we think Draghi made quite a shrewd move last year in the sense, he signed this 9 months extension of QE. So effectively that puts an umbrella over this period of political uncertainty. Of course, we mentioned Italy, but there are elections in the Netherlands, in France, in Germany. So at least I think it removes one element of uncertainty, which is the monetary policy. And of course, inflation is picking up, and we know that this generates concerns in Germany because it's going to reach very soon the 2%. But we don't think the pressure will be strong enough for Draghi to have to taper QE earlier than December. So we think pretty much the ECB is going to remain on hold. They will look through the inflation peak in the first half of the year and then see where inflation settles in the second half. If we are right and we actually don't see underlying inflation picking up significantly, because when you look at wages, actually they're rather on a downward trend rather than an upward, well, then it means that QE could be extended further. And indeed, we expect another extension for the first half of 2018, but at a slightly lower pace of 40 billion per month.
So we can expect we can remain a little bit on the moderate side of optimism this year for Italy and the whole of the eurozone, and uncertainty, unfortunately, will rule the day still. Yeah. Fabio, thank you very much.
Thank you.